The CMO Confidential podcast is a proud member of the I Hear Everything podcast network. Looking to launch or scale your podcast? I Hear Everything delivers podcast production, growth, and monetization solutions that transform your words into profit. Ready to give your brand a voice? Then visit iheareverything.com.
Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com. I'm here today with my guest, John Rudaizky. Today's topic, marketing a service, the art of selling confidence. Now, John is the Global Chief Brand and Marketing Officer and CMO of EY, a company that he has been with for nearly 11 years. He probably has a very long business card with that title. Previously, he worked at WPP, J. Walter Thompson, and Saatchi Saatchi. Welcome, John.
Hello, Mike. Great to be here. And great you have a Brit on your show today.
Yes, it's great of you coming to us from across the pond. So welcome to the show. And hey, John, let's just start with an overview of marketing in the service business. You've spent most of your career in the service business. What's the view at 30,000 feet of marketing in the service business?
It's funny because when you talk about my career in the service business, of course, at WPP, I was in an agency that was in a service business and EY. Yet most of my career has been actually selling consumer goods and electronics, in terms of my clients over the years.
Yeah.
But when I think about services going from, say, marketing services to EY, there's one word that keeps on coming out, which is confidence. That in the end, you're in the confidence game of providing a service that your customer can succeed on. I often think B2B marketing is and B2B brands are more remote of a decision than any other consumer brand. Because in the end, it's your career. If you pick the wrong service provider, your career could not succeed, right? So if you think about it, it's a big decision to decide who you want to come in and work with you. And one of the things I think about in certainly coming into the role I have from being on the agency world as a service business, I wished I'd learned it many years, is in the end, I'm buying confidence. When an agency walks into the room, in the end, I'm going, am I confident with this team that the outcome will be successful for the business that I'm in? And I think in the context of EY, ultimately, from a brand point of view, we are helping out give confidence to our people when they walk in the room that they'll give the right advice to our clients.
All right, let's talk a little bit about confidence, because I agree with you completely that, a lot of times confidence is the thing you're buying, but how do you measure that? And how do you even package it? Like how do you think about it?
I mean, it's a great question, Mike. How do you? I think brands at its core have always built trust, right? So if you look at a brand in its most basic form, it's always been about trust. I think in the context of now, and if I may, talk a bit about our latest campaign,
Sure.
where we're actually using confidence in the expression, shape the future with confidence. In many ways, what that's doing is it's a simple expression of what we do for our clients. When you think about the business we're in, we have sort of assurance at one end, tax at the other, and then, clearly major enterprise-wide transformation, the adoption of AI and the application of AI. And across all of those services, what EY does as a professional services point of view is ensure that the client has the confidence to act, has the confidence to make the decision, and the confidence that whatever they're doing, there'll be a positive outcome. And so confidence is sort of baked into our DNA in many ways of EY, is the advice we give is based on a confident outcome to our client.
And hey, John, how do you gauge where your company is on the confidence scale in the marketplace? Because there's a huge amount of massive companies in your business and in a lot of businesses like yours that are also kind of in there. How do you figure out if you're sitting there as one of our listeners thinking, I'd like this confidence thing. How do I know where I am in the grid of confidence? How do you even go about figuring that out?
So, in many ways, like any brand, there's a range of metrics, right? It's never one question. I mean,
Right.
clearly we do a range of, deep surveys around where we are on the trust metrics. So we'll understand, who do you most trust? So we measure metrics that enable us to determine where we fit on that scale relative, to our peer group, relative to our own standards in many ways. And I think the other part, which I'd say equally important in this confidence thing, is our own people. So, EY is incredible at measuring how confident our own people are at all the time. Because I think, again, at a people business, it's a dimension between what you're providing to your clients and making sure your people are confident in that.
So let's talk about the people thing and how you measure their confidence, because I hear you saying, look, we look at a bunch of variables, one of which we trust. I'm sure there's a consideration variable in there and,
Sure.
awareness and, and then you probably look at how many people are giving you an RFP and what kind of close rate you get. And then you're kind of putting that all in your confidence gronkulator and saying, here's where we are. How do you do it for your people?
I mean, just in fact, I broaden it out. We don't just look at confidence. I mean, we have a range of metrics, right? In terms of the overall.
Oh, if you could share them, I'd love to hear them.
I think like any business, if you look internally, externally, as you said, we're looking at consideration set. I mean, again, B2B and B2C are not that dissimilar in terms of looking at the range of metrics. I think, in the context of people, we look inspired about our purpose, which we haven't talked. Again, I think, one of the big discussion points at the moment around brands is people purpose dead? We believe it's not. I think people still want to think about the organization they work for. So I think when we're thinking about metrics, it ranges from, if you like, the questions are more the kind of why do you feel part of the purpose, all the way through the, to the satisfaction around being in the organization. I don't think there's not one silver bullet metric. I think, overall, as in any brand, it's a combination of metrics.
Got it. And then, so you're working with, you're looking at the confidence of what you're like, how the marketplace is receiving confidence, how your employees feel about the business. And now you're going to work on, expanding the brand. Tell us how you went about that. And what are the key elements our listeners could take away from if they're in a similar situation?
Yeah. So the springboard for our new brand expansion, I would say, is twofold. On the first dimension, we had a new CEO, lady called Janet Troncali, join. Big strategy refresh, where step one was really looking at, what's the future growth strategy. We branded it All In. It's the name of the strategy, but it's also kind of attitude, together all in. We have this huge spectrum of different services, and we know when we provide the value to our customers, we bring on all the full spectrum of services around that, because, there are different dimensions to any transformation.
Tell us all the services you sell so our listeners.
I'll be here for a long time, but I mean,
Shorthand like the genus and species when you're in biology.
In broad terms, if you think about any organization today, the boardroom, you've got everything ranging from supply chain to tax, to technology, to customer-facing innovation. And the way EY is able to operate is whatever issue, we can bring in a different talent around it. So, for example, if you think about a technology transformation today, actually the way you deliver your products or services off the back of it has a tax implication. So the way we think about it is whatever issue you're facing, you are shaping it, but you're building in the different dimensions of the issues, the different needs, rather than a singular vertical focus on it. So we're able to look across the boardroom rather than vertically one by one. And that is where the true value is unlocked for an organization. So, bucket one was really the all-in pivot, was to say, how do we become even, more powerfully focused on our clients and deliver for them in a new way in this era? Yeah. The other one was, as all good brands, is what's changing in the world. And I think when you look around the world, we're sitting in unprecedented times. If you think about the rate of change of geopolitical change, technology, AI, issues like sustainability, socioeconomic shifts, generational shifts, actually we're sitting in a moment in time with unprecedented change.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy what's going. So much going on,
right? It is, and I think so. Where we did as part of the strategy is to say, ultimately, what we know is the organizations that can navigate through these changes thrive. And so that led to kind of part of our strategy, but also became the external strapline: shape the future with confidence, which is, in many ways, you got to shape it, not be shaped by the events around you. And I think, if you look at time, I mean, many of the organizations you work with over the years, things happen. It's the way you reacted. And I think even if you go back just to a short time to something like COVID, the organizations that pivoted, they pivoted their distribution, they pivoted, thrived coming out of that. And so shape the future with confidence is very much an idea right for the times. And it was interesting. I was in Davos last week, and it really resonated, because actually a lot of the conversation were reacting to what's going on in the world. And then a lot of the conversation was, well, what do we do about it? And so, as I say, new strategy, the world is changing around us. What's the right message in a way to take us forward? And a couple of things I'd just say about that. One is it reflects what we do. Again, I think the best brands are authentic. So it's resonated with our people because they know they go into a client's organization and help them figure it out for the future. So it's what they do. And so, you said, what's the advice for people? I'd say be authentic to what you do as a brand. And then I think the other thing is, I remember when I was a graduate, my father had a book on the side of his shelf called Romancing the Brand. I've never been able to find it. I don't know what happened to it, but it was a great book around, the work of a brand is never done.
Never.
And actually you have to keep evolving it, because the world changes around, your business evolves. And so, I would say in many ways, all of us as CMOs, brand leaders, our job is to keep looking what's coming next and position the brand for the next phase.
And well, everyone is feeling this change and reacting to it in different ways. If I'm a smaller company and am not going to be able to hire you guys or somebody like you, how should I be thinking about this change and my brand in this space?
I mean, with no category in mind? Yeah.
No category. I'm out there. Guy is looking at me. My board wants me to do all this stuff. I don't have very much money. I'm a smaller company. What can I learn by watching all the stuff you have done?
I think all of us are living in an era where we have to keep hungry and learning. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. So I think I genuinely mean that. I think all of us have to be out there, hungry, adopting. I think, one of the things I think from a smaller business point of view is collaboration. And I think, it was interesting. The theme of Davos was about collaboration. And it's a very deep part of EY's approach is an ecosystem play. We work together. We don't try and do all of ourselves. We recognize that, technology, that with such shifts, partnership is often a way forward. And so I would say, if I was giving anyone advice is looking for the ecosystem around you that you can build together rather than trying to figure it out all of yourself.
So what I hear you saying is, geez, don't try and do the pace of change is so great. You shouldn't try and do it all yourself. And if you're smaller, you could actually bring on partners pretty easily because, you don't have to work through a giant apparatus or anything else. And And that is, you know, we had one guest on the show who said one of the biggest skills is going to be vendor management over the next 10 years because of
100%.
technology and AI and everything else. You're not going to be able to even learn it fast enough. Talk about that, and then how you are, because
Yeah.
you're using partners.
Yeah.
Tell us how you're doing it.
Yeah. I think, certainly there's a lot of work internally that we do around upskilling. I think, there's no doubt as any organization has to keep a mind on upskilling its own workforce because of the rate of change. So we EY is phenomenal, by the way, in terms of building programs for educating our people on, in this instance, obviously AI is a big play. And then, I think it's a question of, we built a business that works with alliances. It's part of our, one of the things I mentioned, this all-in attitude, together all in, which is the name of our strategy. EY is known for collaborating. EY is known for teaming. Part of the brand message is the better the question, the better the answer, the better the world works. And actually, part of that is the way we operate is getting different people around a room to solve the question. And we have a process called wait space. It's a convening space, but it's a methodology that recognizes most questions today need complex decisions, and they need a different group of people to solve for it, which is why we kind of say, together all in, we can shape the future with confidence.
And that's probably different than a bunch of your competitors who actually will be bringing the whole story in. And we're also watching at CMO Confidential, a lot of agencies get a lot bigger. The mergers where there's going to be three mega agencies. How do you think about that space? And, this size matters or it doesn't, like EY's point on that.
You ask me about competitors, right? And I always say, great businesses and great brands, of course, one's aware of what the competitors are, but you build the brand, you build a business that's right for you in serving your clients. So I kind of mean that we built a brand, we built a system that works for us and our clients. One of the things that, when I joined was baked into the business was, and I've been lucky also by choice. I've always said, go work for an organization where the CEOs believe in brand. And so CEOs, I've had 3 since I'm joining here, deeply believe in the power of brand. And one of the words within that is distinctive brand. And so every business has authentically got to work out what its own distinctive place in the world, rather than worrying too much, I think, what the competitive play is.
Yeah, look, and I've been on a bunch of brands where you had super competitors, and you can look at them as, the people you have to fight, which obviously you're fighting for market share and everything else. But the other way to look at them is competitors make you much more focused and better. And if you didn't, you would probably have to invent them because it pushes you to innovate and change a lot faster. And I'm sure you saw that in the agency space for sure.
Yeah. There's no doubt the agency world is going through a seismic change. I think all of us in marketing are going to go through a seismic change. AI technology is presenting probably, for me, one of the most innovative moments, but it's also going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way we price things. It's going to change the way we execute. We'll be able to do things we've never been able to do before. So how the different agencies organize around that is going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
So let's talk, let's go back to the brand a little bit, set the stage. You had some tough PR news as a company a while ago, coming off a split discussion. Tell us how you dealt with that. And, as a CMO and all that change, tell us how you dealt with that.
Yeah, I often like to say it's old news now, but people
still
asking the question, Mike. So, what I'd say is this: EY has always asked bold questions. I mean, the DNA Better Questions is about asking provocative questions, which it did, and it explored a bold move. The fact that didn't pan out is not all something where one should look. The amount of innovation that came off that I mean, even in some of the work I'm doing, came up the innovative thinking we started to do when you start
Oh,
to
I
think.
bet. I mean, that was a lot of work.
So,
And yeah,
so, I think a business that doesn't take a risk, that doesn't look to innovate, you don't always come out with the outcome that you started with, that actually there are other outcomes of the result of that have been hugely advantageous for the firm, is what I would say.
is there any you could share, or are they all too top secret to put on air?
I mean, it's sort of unfolding, really. I mean, I think probably a bit too top secret, but I mean, some of the bits within the execute, I suppose one of the things, just to give you a flavor, if you've noticed the rebrand fresh, we've introduced color, the spectrum of color into, we've had a very yellow color, now it's the spectrum color. I mean, that was designed to reflect the spectrum of services at a brand level, but actually, because we were starting to look at the future, we thought color was interesting. And that probably opened our eyes to a different way of seeing evolving the brand. So, innovation comes through taking big questions and bold questions, as I say. And sometimes you end up with a different path, but that actually leads to a very powerful path. And I think that's where we're on.
I like that. We'll post anything you want in the comment section when we post the show. So if you want to share your any logo work or anything like that, we are happy to post it. You touched a little bit on AI, and one of the things we're seeing at CMO Confidential is AI eating up a lot of the entry-level marketing jobs at various places. Can you talk about what AI is doing to your business, and then what you think marketers should be working on out there as they look at AI entering at speed into the marketplace?
If I had a crystal ball, I would be able to give it to you with certainty, but I don't have.
Damn it! I was so hopeful you were going to break out the ball and tell me something.
I think we're at the crossroads. None of us quite know exactly where it's going to pan out. I think there are I sort of see two views of it. One is, yes, there'll be the democratization of the average, and yes, some of the functional jobs will be replaced. At the other end of it, it might just be the moment where, as marketers, we can actually innovate in ways that we have not been able to do it. So actually, you could do more in marketing. You think about just even at its most basic, sort of one-to-one marketing.
Right.
It's been cost prohibitive for the most part. And when people have done it, it's very expensive. So actually now maybe that becomes a real tangible thing we can do. So I suppose for me, it's about looking at the efficiency play. But then for me, the other flip is, how can I accelerate and do even more to build the brand and to market the service? And I think that's the duality that's gonna come through. And I think, the winners in a way will be the people that are embracing it to find what more I can do with it, as opposed to fearing what may go away.
I totally agree with that. We've had a bunch of guests on that said, look, you got to be at the top of the funnel, and at the bottom of the funnel, AI allows you to personalize things like loyalty programs, anything you want at speed, but not if you don't know how to use it, and not if you don't have a good database. So there's a whole press, and I think you're calling it out of get going on it any way that you can. I would like to flip to advice for our audience from someone that's been around, the service sector for a long time. Keys to success and misperceptions and mistakes people make in the professional services business.
In the professional services, or my
marketing, anything you want. From your seat, you're talking to, we have an awful lot of marketers and people out there. What are the keys to success, and what are the mistakes people make in terms of how they think about it or what they do with it when they're in the job?
I think for me, I'm orientated to the belief that creativity is the single most defining advantage for a business or for a brand. I really believe in that. And I think sometimes there's been a rush to tactic and technology. And I think sometimes the art of emotional, creative selling has taken a back seat in the conversation. And I think it's a skill. If you say what's the one skill that will thrive through this AI period, I still believe the creative spark, the lateral spark that's going to come through, and the ability to pick an idea and then herd it through a business, which doesn't always, let's face it, selling in an idea. I'm sure you've been there, right? Selling, not everyone says the first idea you walk in, hey, that's great. It takes some selling, it takes some nurturing, it takes confidence, going back to the earlier point. So for me, I would say the mistake is sometimes I think the tactic and the machine of marketing has taken over the art or creativity in that process and celebrating that part of it.
I think this is a good call out. And let me make sure because I agree with you. And I think what you're saying here is the math is the math, but if you don't have some creativity ongoing and are pressing on it, you will optimize the math, but not the brand and not the company and not the financials. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. We just shot 2 films, one called Transformations and one about Generations, which is about purpose and future generations. And I thought I'd link test them just to double check that my gut feeling was right, and I don't, we haven't done it. And what I learned from that, I was reminded that all the theory works. So what I saw in this audience research was the shift in emotion, relationship, all the ways in which creativity works in an emotional way, not a logical way.
I think that, and just so everybody listening understands how you did that test, can you share kind of just the basics for how you did that test?
So yes, they exposed the ad. It's fairly basic. So I think, I don't know exactly the numbers. We did a couple of 100 people, and they're following it and they're getting responses to it. And what you're seeing is off the back of this is shifts in relationship attitudes towards us, shifts in consideration to us, but the actual ad built warmth and emotion. What was that book many years ago? The Art of Persuasion.
Yeah.
I think creative is a subtle way of persuading people to prefer your brand. And I think whatever the agency line up in the future, there will need and continue to be people who can come up with very lateral thoughts.
Great. We are happy to post those when we do the show as well.
Right. Fantastic. Sure.
And then, last question before we get to our last question. If I'm sitting there listening to this show thinking, man, I want a career like John's, what advice would you give them on how to get to have a career like you've had?
I was going to say start on a market stall like I did, but I don't think we need them anymore. It's all online now. I'm not sure if there's any stalls that exist in a market. I would say number one, I genuinely believe follow your passion, and that's really important. That goes without saying. And then push as hard as you can to work for the most innovative company and people. I count myself lucky. I got into Saatchi Saatchi many years ago. It was the agency. What I would say is the agency of the planet. The sort of diaspora of people around the world speaks for themselves. But I was lucky enough to work with incredible people that pushed me up. The old thing, if you play tennis against a better opponent, you go up. And I think for me, it would be about landing a job where you're surrounded by brilliant people, because they will, whatever you good, they'll lift you to that next standard.
Okay. I think great advice, which brings us to our traditional last question. It's a harder. You can pick one or both, but you must pick at least one. Practical advice for our listeners we haven't talked about yet, and or funniest story you can tell on the air. Go with one of those or both of those. It's your turn.
So I might deviate. I've just finished listening to Quincy Jones's book, 12 Notes. I don't know
Okay.
if you've heard it. It's a beautiful audiobook. And there were two things that struck me. One is, I didn't know this, I'm not musical. There are only 12 notes in music, and you can therefore have infinite. And I kind of think in a career sense, there are so many choices you can have. Play the notes, right? And I thought that was an interesting thing. And I think the other thing I was thinking in the relation to this podcast today is your career goes through journeys, right? Nothing is linear. Nothing is that predictable. And Quincy Jones, I think the song, Keep On Keeping On.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something to think about for any one of your listeners is, tomorrow we don't know what's going to happen, but just keep on it and keep innovating and forge your path.
I like it, but I won't sing it because I was kicked out of choir. So
Me too.
at an early age. So, but keep on keeping it. I think it's a great way to end the show. So, John, thank you for joining us. And thanks everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include Why is B2B Marketing So Bad and What to Do About It, Parts 1 and 2. Is your next best customer an AI bot? It's a bird, it's a plane, holy shit, it's AI, Parts 1 and 2. And the Warby Parker case. I can see clearly now with my CLTV glasses on. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.